Getting on the cover of Time magazine, for most people, that's it. You've made it. It's like the ultimate sign of success. But what if it's not? What if, for some, being on that cover isn't the peak, but actually the beginning of a huge fall? Well, today, we're going to dig into the weird and frankly fascinating story of the Time magazine jinx.
So, our story really kicks off in late 2025. Time announces its Person of the Year, and it's not just one person, it's a whole group, the architects of AI. And we're talking about the absolute biggest names in the field, right? Leaders from Meta, NVIDIA, OpenAI, basically all the giants who are building our future. Now, on the surface, you see that and think, wow, what a huge celebration of innovation. It looks like the ultimate stamp of approval. But what if it's the exact opposite? What if it's a giant warning sign flashing in bright red letters? That's the big question we're going to try and answer.
And that question leads us to this really interesting contrarian idea called the magazine cover indicator. The theory is actually pretty simple, but it's super powerful. It suggests that by the time an idea or a trend gets so big that it lands on the cover of a magazine like Time, well, it's not a secret anymore. It's totally mainstream. And if you're an investor, that might just mean the best days of growth are already in the past. Now, here's a crucial point. Not all magazine covers work this way. A financial magazine, something like Barron's, that's what we'd call a coincident indicator. It's written for people in the know, and it tells you what's happening in the markets right now. But Time is different. For a story to make it to their cover, the theme has to be, and this is key, super obvious to just about everyone. And as the theory goes, when something becomes super obvious, it often means it's already peaked. So, is this for real, or is it just a fun little theory people talk about? Well, let's actually take a walk through history, because there's some pretty compelling evidence that this jinx is the real deal. We're going to look at 5 huge moments, starting way back in 1929 and coming all the way up to just a few years ago. And as we go through them, I think you're going to start to see a pretty undeniable pattern emerge. Okay, first up, 1929. This is a big one. The Person of the Year was a guy named Owen Young, who was the head of RCA. Now, you have to understand, RCA was the tech company of its day, kind of like the NVIDIA or Apple of the 1920s. He gets this huge honor right at the center of a massive tech bubble, which was literally weeks away from bursting and kicking off the Great Crash. And yep, this chart says it all. The cover comes out while the stock is flying high, and then it just completely collapses. It's a perfect, almost painful example of a cover story marking the absolute tippy top right before a disaster. All right, let's jump forward to 1982. This time, the Person of the Year wasn't even a person. It was the computer. This was the exact moment when computers stopped being a weird hobby for nerds and started showing up in homes and offices everywhere. It was official. Computers were mainstream. So, what happened next? Well, the jinx struck again. The really hyped-up stocks, the ones everyone was excited about, like Apple and Commodore, they performed horribly. The more boring, established companies like IBM did okay. But the exciting part of the industry, the trend was bad. The peak of the hype was clearly over. Okay, so you're probably thinking, there has to be an exception, right? A good theory always has one. And you're right. In 1997, Andrew Grove, the CEO of Intel, got the cover. And this is the only case we're looking at where the stock was actually higher a year later. So, did the jinx finally fail? Well, not so fast. It's all about the timing here. That cover came out in 97, which was before the dot-com bubble went completely insane. So yeah, Intel stock kept roaring higher for a few more years, but it roared right into the peak of the bubble in 2000, and then, just like all the others, it crashed hard. So the cover wasn't wrong, it was just early. And that brings us to the 2 most recent and, honestly, the most shocking examples. And I'm just going to use a direct quote from our source material here because it puts it perfectly. Both these covers were the exact top of huge spec bubbles. Just look at this for a second. In 1999, Jeff Bezos gets the cover, literally at the exact top of the first dot-com bubble. Then, in 2021, Elon Musk gets the cover, and it perfectly marks the top of that wild, speculative tech bubble. I mean, the timing is so perfect, it's almost spooky. So all of this history, this clear pattern of peaks and spectacular falls, It all brings us right back to where we started. So now we have to ask the billion-dollar question. Is it AI's turn to be on top, right before the fall?
I mean, that 2025 cover is a who's who of the AI revolution. You've got leaders from Meta, AMD, NVIDIA, OpenAI, DeepMind, the entire ecosystem of the AI boom, all sharing one cover. Now, if you're taking this historical pattern seriously, the source material points to a specific group of stocks that everyone should be watching in 2026. They've even given it a name, the Manta Basket.
MANTA is just an acronym, pretty easy to remember. It stands for Meta, AMD, NVIDIA, Tesla, and Alphabet. These are pretty much the giants at the absolute heart of this whole AI-driven market.
And so, after looking at all that history, we have to come back to our main question. Are these huge, powerful companies about to become the next victims of the Time magazine jinx? But look, here's the most important takeaway from all of this. This indicator, this jinx, it's not magic, it's not a curse. It's really all about psychology. It's a simple but effective tool for recognizing that moment when a trend goes from being an exciting new thing to just being super obvious to everyone on the planet. And history shows us that's usually the moment of maximum danger, not maximum opportunity. So, I'll leave you with a final question to think about. The next time you see some huge, celebrated trend splashed across the cover of a major magazine, just take a second and ask yourself, am I seeing the beginning of the story, or am I watching the grand finale? What's on a cover today that might be peaking tomorrow?